So I'm the founder of the Accountants Growth Club, and we help accounting firm owners, be that bookkeepers, accountants, portfolio FDs, outsourced finance department, tax advisors, profitably grow and scale their practice whilst we're working fewer hours with less stress. And, one of the things we often find is that bookkeeping is unprofitable. It's a loss leader. Gareth, do you want to do a quick introduction to yourself and Xenon Connect?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Heather. So I'm Gareth. I'm a chartered accountant, been in practice for years, up until 2 years ago. Jumped across to software 4 years ago. So we built Xenon Connect, which is bookkeeping cloud software that plugs into the ledgers, automatically detects likely bookkeeping errors, and presents them to the accountant or bookkeeper for their review. That's me in a nutshell.
Brilliant. And so let's talk about the biggest issue that we see is that bookkeepers think they're there to do the books, whereas the firm owners think they're there to service the client, upsell bookkeeping, maybe do a bit of cash flow forecasting, realize that the client they're working with needs a higher service level. But actually, the bookkeeper thinks they're there to do the books. But and I know that the way the world is going, what's going on is that when you control the bookkeeping, this is your best way as a firm to generate more work because you've got that real-time view of what's going on in your practice. However, we've got a disconnect between what you want and what your bookkeeping team want because they want to do the books. So what are your initial thoughts on this, Gareth?
It's a great topic, isn't it? And I think it's a big problem because it involves a massive shift in mindset from the bookkeeper's point of view. Because I know when I was trained to be a bookkeeper and accountant, I was trained to the nth degree on how to get to an accurate trial balance. That is what I felt that my day-to-day involved. That's what made me who I am in the working world. That was my role. And then for someone to come in and say, well, actually, you need to do more than that. You need to think on your feet. You need to put those rules aside, those double entry bookkeeping rules. You need to go one step further and say, well, actually, think of it from the business owner's point of view. What do they need from us in addition to the compliance to really help them make better decisions? And obviously, it may be that it's not for everybody. Maybe some bookkeepers that don't want to jump into this, and that's completely fine from their point of view. However, I feel that there is a massive opportunity to do more, but it definitely involves a higher level of accuracy of bookkeeping data and timely bookkeeping data.
And I think there's a really good point here is I'm not saying you're old, and I know you're at least 10 years younger than me. But if you think back 10, 15, 20 years, bookkeeping was take a receipt, key it in. Take a receipt, key it in. At the end of the month, take the bank statement and reconcile that against every single receipt, whether it's purchase or whether it's sales ledger. Match it all off, have a chat with the client about missing receipts, repeat the next month. And actually that role has changed completely, isn't it? Because if you think about the good cloud bookkeeper today, what they're not doing is take a receipt, key it in. What they're doing is managing streams of information in. Then their next job is to make sure that those streams of information get in a way that's fast but accurate. And actually their role has significantly shifted into problem solver, i.e. this doesn't match up, what's going on, we need a chat with the client, to commercial insight, what are we actually seeing from the data? And then, efficiency, both for the client and for the bookkeeping. So when do you think this kind of shifted and changed? And by the way, am I just talking from a very abstract point of view, or is that what you see the cloud bookkeeper role has changed into?
Definitely with the cloud bookkeeping role. But what I should add is that, for example, this morning I had a conversation with a potential new Xenon partner, and he's just started a firm whereby they've never used cloud software at all. They've got over 100 clients that are going to be shifted from a desktop package to cloud since his arrival over the coming months. And he says that some of his clients, it's taking more than a week to input the data when the bookkeeping data comes in because they're still banging in paper copies and saving paper copies in folders. So I think sometimes we live in a bit of an echo chamber on LinkedIn whereby we assume that everyone's doing the same sort of thing and they're all cloud-based. But the reality is that there's many firms out there that aren't cloud-based, even to that level, a basic level yet, haven't even got bank feeds set up. But I think most people watching this that are on LinkedIn tend to be on the side whereby they probably have already implemented cloud and they're looking for that next way to really improve things to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah, that's a really good point. First and foremost, you as the owner of the firm need to decide what you want to happen in your team. All too often, we BMW it. I won't say the B word, but we moan and we whinge. You know what the B word is. But what we don't do is really think about our role in this. If you're wanting what you and I would see as a good data entry clerk, which, we're not saying that's what the traditional bookkeeper was, but that was one of the roles, was a good data entry clerk. If you're happy with that, that's fine. Set those expectations. But most people aren't happy with that. And they want their bookkeepers to think, to take initiative. But all they train them to do is be a good data entry clerk. And what they don't do is set expectations. You ran your firm for a bit. How did you set expectations with your bookkeepers?
I think it means you don't leave it to chance, the process. If you're systemizing these sorts of things, then you've got a higher degree of chance that these things are going to get done. With it being a massive shift in the way that they do their day to day, by looking for these issues on top of the compliance side of things, you need to make sure they've had that initial training, whatever that training may be. I'm not aware of any formal training that a bookkeeper or accountant could take for this, really. Because when we train, as I said earlier, you learn how to do the compliance. So any tax planning training, any business strategy training that you do is completely theoretical at that level until you become management or above within a firm. So it's asking somebody who's not had that experience at the high level to do something they haven't done before, really.
Mm.
So it's tricky, but in my mind, it is training. It's setting expectations, working out what you want them to do first within the firm, and then systemizing that process so you're not leaving it to chance.
Yeah, when we talk about setting expectations, what we are particularly bad at in this profession is every quarter sitting down with our team going, these are your targets. Let's talk about whether you've got the skills to achieve this, whether you've got a plan to achieve this. We don't do that. We kind of talk a little bit about where the business is going. We go, well, you're part of the team and you're going to do this, but we don't actually go into what I call that granular level. So we set the expectation with our bookkeeper that you'll find opportunity to upsell. The bookkeeper hears that and goes, I don't know how to do it. You then go and fluff into getting involved in client work and being too busy to look. So they kind of go, well, they're not checking on me. And we get the service we inspect, not we expect. And because you're not checking on them, because you've not provided anything else, they just go back to what they've already done. Then you turn around to me and go, my bookkeepers don't want to do this. And actually, if you want that bookkeeper to upsell, you don't just tell them you wanted to do it, but you've got to help them with the how. Gareth is going to be talking a lot about that. You can't just expect people to go in there. Now, one of the hows is a bookkeeping health check. So given that you've run the firm, you've built these things, how would you introduce that to your bookkeepers to help them with this how bit of upselling?
So first of all, it's making sure they can use the software, they get to grips with the basics of using the software in terms of the data health check, how to run an initial check in the first place, but then giving them the scenarios whereby it would make sense to use it for upselling. So the first obvious one is the overall PDF bookkeeping health check itself. If the client's doing their own bookkeeping, then it's an easy way of saying, actually, as we discussed a bit yesterday, the quality of his bookkeeping is no good. But taking the emotion out of that conversation with the client by saying these specific issues need fixing, we can help you with that, but we're going to be charging this for providing that bookkeeping service for you. But we can take the pressure off you as a client, and we'll make sure that the quality is 100% every quarter, every month, or every year, whatever it may be. So that's the first obvious way that gets a lot of success. But digging down deeper into the individual 24 checks we've got, virtually all of those 24 checks offer a way of providing extra value if you decide to. So things like even something as simple as, okay, there's an old unpaid sales invoice here that's gone past 90 days. If you know no one's been chasing that, then there's an obvious opportunity there to provide the ability or the service to chase those debtors for the client, or to provide debt management as well. If you see that there's suppliers that have multi-coded VAT codes and they're consistently not claiming VAT that they should be doing, then you can jump in and say, actually, we can provide you with a VAT review now to make sure that you're claiming every pound that you can back. And it's all systemized within these checks, so it's not left to chance. It's a shift away from the mindset of thinking, what do I need to fix in this bookkeeping in order to get in compliance done, to get this report accurate, to what do I need to do in this bookkeeping to get it accurate, but also to just join the dots and find some extra service areas that you could provide to the client that they will want and need.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, is if you talk about them getting the bookkeeping done in a clean trial balance, and that's all you talk about, you'll get the bookkeeping done in a clean trial balance. And I think there's also what I would call layers to this. So you take your young apprentice that started the bookkeeping. they are not going to initially want to pick up the phone. So the first thing you've got to do is set the expectations on, we want to have a conversation with clients, not an email dialogue. We want to have a conversation with clients. So actually, you probably need to get them to sit with you to do those first few calls to role model what good looks like. Then once they're doing those first few calls, you'll sit with them and listen in. And then you've got the expectation set that doesn't matter about the ledger here bit, reconciliation bit here. Your clients are not bothered about that. But what we want to do is get you comfortable with talking with your clients, because actually you're not going to be able to upsell until you're comfortable with talking with your clients. That is the first level. The second level is you've then got to teach them to, as you say, to use the software. That actually they need to know that you're expecting them on your workflow in your practice management system to check the box that says you've run that software. These were the issues, and this is what you want to do about them. Now, let's go back. So you've identified 3 issues that's worth a conversation. My little junior that's 19, fresh out of school, is probably not ready for that conversation. However, you want to direct them to somebody that could have that conversation. What you don't want to do is go, I'll take it off your hands. You just go back. You want to then make sure that they're sitting in with you so they are starting to learn, how do you have that conversation? Because as you say, this is the stuff that we pick up when we're with those more experienced. Your bookkeeper may never be comfortable with having that conversation without you there. And you've got to understand that that's potentially where their limit is. However, they may then be ready to go and be a full client manager and do the upsell conversation themselves, at which point you've then got to teach them about pricing. But we don't normally do that. We just go, why won't they upsell more? We don't think about it. Where are they in their competence journey? What are they doing? If they're just getting to speed with, so that's called the nominal ledger, you're not going to get them having a conversation with the client right off the bat, but you can expect them to run the software. You can expect them to say to you, look, this has come up as an amber. What should we do about it? If they're very green, they're not going to be coached about what they could do about it. However, so you'll start by telling, then you'll start by asking, and then you'll start by collaborating. And then if they get to that point, they may tell you, I'm ready to do this by myself, go away. But the problem is, we don't have time to do that. We have this magical fairy world in our head that goes, they're a bookkeeper, they're an upsell, I'm paying 30 grand for them, they can do this.
I think it's very difficult to teach. I think it's very difficult to gain that feeling of what it feels like to be a business owner and have the problems that business owners have without being a business owner or being close to them. So I think there's 3 ways really that I can think of that we could help to make sure that our team are better versed in finding these issues and communicating them. And the first one really for me is, as you mentioned, it's having them in those high-level client meetings. Even if they're just silently sitting there, just taking it all in, listening from the business owner's point of view about what the struggles are in that business owner's journey so far and how the client manager or director dealt with that conversation and what their opportunities were that they spotted, just to give them that overall look at, okay, these are the sorts of problems that we tend to find. Can I then duplicate that with other clients to find any other issues? And then even if it's just communicate them then to the client manager once they found it with the clients, it's that overall learning. So that's the first one. I think the second one is perhaps not thought of often, and it's why not get them on a secondment with the large client? Maybe for a month, throw the bookkeepers in, maybe one at a time, with one of the large clients to see day to day. And I mean in person, go to the actual premises, just to be there. I was talking to Lara Manton last November on a podcast recording that we did, and she was saying that she feels that bookkeepers are best placed to help clients with added value problems that they may have, as the touch points a bookkeeper has compared to an accountant are massive. They're there day in, day out, or week in, week out. They're the person that the client tends to go to and say, oh, because they're there at that point in time when that client has a problem. They're the first point of call. So if you can get in there, you'll be the first person they talk to, and you'll see firsthand what the problems of those business owners are. So that's the second one, is get them on client secondment if the opportunity is there for them. And the third one, and it's a bit out there really, but it's what I did when I was trading, a side hustle. Get the employee to start a side hustle or encourage it. Don't put them off doing it. It sounds counterintuitive because you feel like it might take up their working time. For me, when I was training in 2003, I ran a business in data storage, online data storage for 3 years. And it allowed me to see the ins and outs of what it was like. First of all, setting up a company, like for me as a business owner doing it, not as an accountant, bookkeeper training doing it. And then the problems that I had filing the accounts and tax returns, even with a bit of experience in accounts and bookkeeping at that stage. So if I was having those problems with a bit of experience at that stage, you can imagine what business owners have. And just the day-to-day, okay, these are gross profit margin ratios that you need to be considering, and the position ratios. These things for bookkeepers and accountants, they're all theoretical until they're not, until it actually means something to you. So having that first-hand experience of a side hustle or a separate business, or being close to other business owners, whether it's a family member or just, as I say, a client, getting close to them as well, seeing what their problems are and how they're thinking about things is massively invaluable. And I feel that those feelings that you'll glean from those conversations and experiences can't be taught.
And yeah, I love that idea, but I also think that I think you were fairly entrepreneurial. Because let's be honest, you've had a number of businesses, and it just so happens you were an accountant along the way. I think it's spoken to you. I don't think I define you as an accountant, but I think there's a way that you can get some of that. So number one is, we often kind of go, oh, we can't talk about the problems with our business, with our team. Talk about it. We're not talking about that person's underperforming, but don't sugarcoat the tough stuff. I literally share my full P&L. Okay, I don't give the breakdown of wages, but they know exactly what I take out of the business. I literally share my full P&L with my direct team members and even my close suppliers. But we often don't do that. We just talk about revenue. And as you say, how on earth is your bookkeeper going to learn commercial awareness if you never talk about profit in your business? If that's a dirty word. So number one, be honest about what's going on in your business. Now, you've got to use a bit of judgment. So if the world is falling down around you and it's not the right time to let people know that, don't let people know that. But actually the day to day of, right, okay, this is the impact of this person not paying, really, really helps, and be open with it. Normally we just go and then move on, don't we? We don't have that. The second thing is, this is a really useful thing to do once a month with your bookkeepers. Take a client that you all know well and dissect it and have a real chat about, how do they make money? Where are they losing money? How would we advise them? What do we think their issues are? And actually, once a month, as a training session, take one or two clients that you all know well and really dissect them and get them to think about that commercial side of things. You don't need to send them on a training course for that, but you can start to embody it. I'm talking a lot at the moment with my other side of my business about entrepreneurship versus intrapreneurship. And we often think we want our bookkeepers to be entrepreneurial, but actually entrepreneurial people that often are a bit of an arse. They want to do it by themselves. They tend not to be good at taking direction. They are the type that if you want them to set up your newest office in Pontypridd, you send them there and go, over to you. They're not one firm players, typically. And what we actually need from our bookkeepers is not entrepreneurial, we need that intrapreneurial, that they think about the firm as a whole. They think about building the team together, but they've got enough commercial awareness to see where there are opportunities. They're also prepared to risk a little bit and have that extra conversation, which is what we need, rather than this lusting over the thought that we need entrepreneurial bookkeepers. Because actually we don't. We need people that are good at following a process. We need people that are excellent at detail. We need people that love talking with clients. That's what we need. Those typically don't match up with an entrepreneur, whereas we need an intrapreneur. Keep this one short this time, and we could go on for another 20 minutes. So if you were to leave people with maybe three main points about how do you get your bookkeepers to step up and upsell for you, what would be those main points?
Set expectations first would be teach them what you want them to do, essentially, what you expect from them by leading from the front, really. Systemizing that process, not leaving it to chance. So it's creating a checklist, it's using data health checks, for example, if you decide to, whereby it's driven by the bookkeeping data itself. So it's an easy way of them flowing down that system rather than having a separate checklist that they have to refer to. Third of all, it's following up with them, seeing how they're doing, seeing what their thoughts are on particular clients, and making sure and just guiding them that, they're acting in the way that you expect them to, so that their mission is in line with the overall firm's mission.
Yeah, I love that. My points would be, it's what you inspect that you get rather than what you expect. Number two, there's often a big gap between what you'd like them to do and their competence and capability and willingness, and you've got to bridge that gap. And number three, I hate saying this and people hate me saying this, you get the team you deserve. So get the white space in your diary and realize you've got to work them. Gareth, how can people get in touch with you?
So gareth@xenonconnect.com is my email address. xenonconnect.com is the web address, and find me on LinkedIn, Gareth Salomon.
Yep. I'm Heather at heathertownsend.co.uk. Would love to speak to people. Drop me a little DM. and hopefully see people on the webinar tomorrow.
Thanks a lot.